We're talking with Amy B. Chesler. I love that you like an Amy B. Like, well,
Yeah.
I like the ABCs, but I think if I knew her, I'd be like, Amy B, what up?
Yeah. It's a good rap name too.
Yeah, and
I do actually rap, by the way.
Uh oh.
It's so bad, but I love it.
And let's see here. When did your book release? Working for Justice released. When?
2021.
2021.
I actually
Congratulations.
Thank you. I sold it the week after my divorce was finalized. I was like, "Ooh, hallelujah!" Life was unfolding as it should. Yes, thank you.
For you guys who don't know, also Amy is a neighbor. She lives out in Calabasas, not far from us. Had I not been sick, I bet we could have pulled an in-person interview. It would have been lovely. But Amy came on the show to talk about some terms I've kind of heard but didn't really know about. One was sibling abuse. And she also told the story of how her brother murdered her mother in 2007. Yeah. Was that when it was?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow. And you tell the story so well. It feels to me like there's been a lot of work on your side to understand how this can happen. I also think it's really amazing when people come to tell stories that often people are afraid to hear because they can't imagine how they would walk through it. But you took us through this process, and you and Laura had an amazing conversation about it. So I think the first thing I want to know, and I think I speak for people, is, when you look back, your brother was 2 years older than you, and you were abused by him as well, right? Mm-hmm. And your father was not in the picture, but he was also abusive, right?
Yes.
So I guess when people are listening to the story, they're wondering when and where. Was there a way? Do you ever wonder if you could have prevented this from happening, or is this something that you just accept? You said in the interview that things don't happen for a reason. Things happen for a million reasons. And
a million fucking reasons.
Yeah, a million fucking reasons. And I'm sure you've explored all of those. I don't think, that any of us could go through that situation, not wonder how it got to where it got. But maybe you could just take us on a little journey of yours and tell us how you've come to terms with it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, like my poise or whatever. But I did an interview this morning that I cried my whole way through, and this whole time I've been sitting talking to you, I've been thinking, wow, I'm really holding it together. How am I actually staying on the question and not crying? And that I want to speak to that just because I think grief is not linear. I think disenfranchised grief, whether we're grieving an actual person's death, or actual grief, or disenfranchised grief where we're grieving a relationship that is my brother being in prison, or my kids not having a grandparent, or there are so many facets of grief that are wrapped up into it that it's not a linear process in any way. No. And I have my moments of being up and down, but generally I've mastered a lot of it. And you know what? I haven't carried much personal responsibility. That is what the trolls will come on the internet, and honestly I'll post something where Eva lives here love to say I was on a date and my mom was murdered, and a lot of people were like, well, bitch, why were you home? Go home and save your mom. What are you doing? And I was like, this is entirely ignoring the fact that my brother murdered my mother. I am not a murderer. Right. I am not responsible. There was some forgiveness I had to give myself for allowing some of the abuse that I faced at his hands. I'm never gonna forgive him. I can't. He's a sociopathic narcissist who murdered and also threatened my life. However, I've forgiven myself. There were moments where I felt grief in not sharing with my mom. I shared the depth of the abuse I faced at his hands. Some of that I never reported to my mother. So I have gone through those thoughts and thought, well, what if I had reported? Would she be alive? However, that's not on me. As much as I've contemplated those thoughts, I think I'm relatively good at compartmentalizing some of the notions that just don't serve me in a way that they're not even mine. You know what I mean? That I can recognize as not mine. It's society's kind of belief. But my brother was the abuser and was the murderer, and that is the language I now know to be truthful enough to just kind of abandon any sort of self-doubt or grief, or not grief, but guilt. That's what the word I was looking for.
I feel you, yeah. That must take a lot of work, and that's digging into a lot of things that probably you don't want to look at, and finding someone that you can share them with that you trust. And also, I heard in the interview that you found community, and you've started a podcast of people who may, growing up, I'm sure you felt like the only one that had the experience that you had, but now you're finding other people that have variations of the same experience, and you guys get to share and be normal. We call normal average to the population, right? So if you're in a room full of people who've been victims of domestic violence, you might be in a more normal situation.
I tell my kids there is
helpful,
no normal.
I
tell my kids
I
everybody's
tell people
pretending to be normal. None of us are normal.
I say it's like Bigfoot. It's been sighted. People are aware of it, but nobody's actually living normal.
That's funny.
And but that's really helpful, huh? I mean, we actually share a guest that is a dear friend of yours as well.
Yeah.
Collier Landry, and I was so impressed by the way he told his story too. It's really cool that you guys have found each other and found. I mean, you've been to his birthday party.
Oh, totally. I
holidays with him. That's
totally. Yeah, I love it. And you know what? It speaks to also just when we share our stories. That's what we're giving ourselves as well as other people. I love when I get messages daily from either women who say, "My son is abusive. Thank you for sharing your mom's reality. It might protect me one day." Or I get women who say, "I was abused by my brother," or women, men who say, "I was abused by my sister," or any combination. But I get siblings all the time that say, "I was abused by my sibling. Thank you for naming something. Thank you for letting me know I wasn't alone." I mean, even my uncle said that about my dad when he read my book. So it's been so validating to hear that and to receive that. And every time I receive a message like that, I write back with virtually the same thing, some variation. I will say something like, I'm heartbroken that you experienced something similar, but I know the tiny bit of solace that we get from finding someone that's been through something that's the same, that we know we're not alone. That community is healing. And with community comes awareness, and then with awareness comes change. And these are all the steps we just have to take. And I feel like I entered this space also with a little bit of training and some interest in writing, and I have the onus of responsibility in sharing. Not, like I said, not everybody's going to step on a podcast and talk about their trauma, but not everybody has to.
Yeah, I mean, I love that we have podcasting that can find niches like this where people they run to the, it would take years for people, for someone in a position of power to create something that would allow people, but we've been given the freedom to be like, this is what I want to talk about, and if you'd like to sit down, join me. And I think you'll be a great success. The podcast is actually called What Came Next. Is that correct? It
is, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, great name, by the way.
Thank you.
The last thing I think I want to talk about, and this, you might have gone past this. Actually, there's a lot I'd love to talk about, but you said that your mother, your mother Hadas. Did I get that right?
You did. Both of you did. I'm so impressed.
I emulate. She tries to teach me names all the time. So.
I am so impressed.
Your mother Hadas loved your brother to the end. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
When you tell me how that affects you? Like, I think it kind of wells up when I hear it.
Yeah.
And especially the scene you described, when they were arguing in the kitchen, and I mean, but tell me how that affects you, love, knowing that this your brother, who is now in jail for probably the rest of his life, Jesse.
Yes, for the rest of his life. Hallelujah. Sorry, we just got that.
Couldn't see or couldn't accept his mother's love, or like, I just find it to be such an interesting crossroad.
A lot of people will say, like, "Oh, well, what did your mom do to him? Or was she abusive?" And I'll be honest, she was a teacher. She had her master's in education. She was not an uneducated woman with dealing with children. She was actually everybody's mother. She was every single best friend that I ever had was probably somebody who had a bit of a rough childhood. I think we always found each other in youth. And she was everybody's mom. So she was, of course, going to be the best mom ever for him. She tried to be the best. She tapped into every faculty that she had for him. And what it does to me is that, honestly, it validates what I have to speak about in terms of my brother. And it also just validates my journey as a mother. I try to emulate my mom's love, tenacity. And I've always wanted to be a mom since my youth. I never had a moment where I ever doubted wanting to be a mother. And I think it's so... My mom lives on in my parenting, and I think that I saw such an undying love. I'm grateful that I saw a woman undyingly love her child, no matter how awful he treated her. And although it probably put me in danger at times, the enablement that eventually occurred when he was 25, still living at home and being violent. Right. I am safe, and I am thankful for her ultimately.
Yeah,
and
it's
definitely.
Gorgeous. I think you're holding the torch well for your mom.
Thank you.
And I think it would scare a lot of people away to have to, confront that and consider that love might not be enough. But, I think we
I don't think love is enough.
Moving forward.
but for a parent, a whole lot of love can last a lifetime. And I haven't heard my mom's voice in 16 years. She hated the camera, and that's also another reason I really love to leave my kids with as much of me as possible. But I try to. I really appreciate that compliment, because that's my ultimate goal. Is always on my podcast. It's my guest, But ultimately, my ultimate goal is just to serve my mother and make her proud, because that was kind of always my role, but I also like to fill it.
Yeah. I felt it, and I think she lives on. And
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling this story.
Yeah.
I think people need to hear this. So,
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for giving me the platform to be heard.